I gave Harry Tam a call the other day if he'd come and talk to us and share some of his worldly experience and tell us what's going on from his side of the world. And he joins us right now. Harry Tam, good evening to you, sir.
Yeah. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora,
Thank
Harry.
you for joining us. Do you do that in the mornings? Do you kind of wake up and check your phone to see if Christopher Luxon's mentioned you the day before? Is it a daily thing for you?
No.
No. It might be a really silly question. In fact, let me just play 10 seconds of video here. This is Christopher Luxon the other day when he got asked about something you'd said.
You move on to the gang crackdown as well, because
sure.
Yes, you campaign on it, great, you're delivering it, but I watched a piece on the news last night, and you've got, and you're pissing off the right people, to be honest. Harry Tam, he's brassed off, he's calling it a laughable PR stunt that won't work. What do you make of that?
Don't care about Harry Tam, my friend. Don't care about Harry Tam. Irrelevant.
Okay. Do you care about the Māori?
Do you care
gangs?
Let's be clear about that.
Do you care about the Māori?
So Lloyd Burr says that he's pissing off the right people, meaning you. Why is it that Christopher Luxon uses you as this kind of light to shine upon? Like, you're the name that comes out constantly when he wants to talk about gangs and the problem with gangs. Why is it you? Why isn't he just talking more generally? Why has he made you a figurehead?
I guess maybe better that you actually ask him about that. My own belief is that, there's a whole game that's going on that these guys are playing, and essentially it's the same game that Hitler played. You got to blame somebody, and you start off with people that are different from you, the Jews, the homosexuals, the communists, or whatever. And I think it's a similar game. Basically, he demonizes me because it suits that I stand out. I'm Chinese and I'm supposed to be a gang member and all the rest of it. And it attracts a certain amount of attention. And really, it's to distract the public from what really is going on with this government. I mean, this whole tough on crime rhetoric is really to create smoke and mirrors and so forth. Because, this whole thing about gangs. I mean, I jumped in, did a few figures today, and I looked at the New Zealand population in 2021 was 5.123 million, and in the same year it was supposed to be about 8,061 gang members. Now that works out to be a ratio of 1.5 gang members to every 1,000 New Zealanders. So the reality of anyone seeing a patch gang member is actually quite remote, unless you actually live in the hoods that they reside in, right? So you might see them driving past on a bike or in a car, occasionally out of shopping, but the reality of it, most people don't actually see gangs with patches. Where they see it is predominantly by the media. See, like every time there's a story about gangs, there's a patch, there's a gang member, there's televised videos, and then the politicians feed off that and the media feeds off the politicians. So when you take a look at the numbers, in proportion to the population, it's relatively small. Yeah, sure, the numbers have gone up a bit, but overall, most New Zealanders probably don't see a lot of gang members with their patches on, or gang members full stop. So what we actually have here is what is known as a moral panic. So the whole issue is blown way beyond its proportion. And that suits this particular government because there's a whole lot of other stuff that's going on. For example, like, today doing away with the Māori health people, organisation, changing the RMA so overseas can come in and mine the iron sands of the Taranaki coast. Having pseudoephedrine sold in supermarkets because, if you go to your local Countdown or Woolworths now, there's a chemist there. And we all know that pseudoephedrine is the basis of making meth. And of course, we also know, the tobacco thing, which has been debated. And, and the politicians that are there have all had interest in them. As you know, I think Chris Hipkins was once a lobbyist for the tobacco industry. David Seymour and his connection with chemical what do you call them? Bloody medicinal companies,
I think you said. I think you said Chris Hipkins is I think you mean Chris Bishop, don't you? Chris Bishop was a lobbyist for the tobacco.
Sorry. Sorry,
That's right.
Chris and Chris. but
Too many
basically,
Chris's.
there's a whole lot of stuff going on. And also, if you listen to the rhetoric, it's sort of like tough on gangs, tough on crime, boot camps. And we all know the evidence is really clear. Boot camps don't work. But they don't care. You know, I'm not going to talk to Harry Tam. I don't care. I don't care what they say. Yeah. So when you sort of do a discourse of the language that's being used, it's the language of people that have power. And the people that they don't care about are the people that don't have power. So, and it's the same language as the colonizers. You know, we have power and we'll do what we like. Turn up there with a gunboat, pull out the muskets, and you can take whatever you want. And that's basically what's happening here. And all these other things are just sideshows to distract us from seeing through this government for what it really is. I don't buy it. And that's why they want to flog me all the time. Carry on. I've had it for 51 years. My skin's like bloody armor. Bring it on.
I'd like to ask you a real straight up question because you said I wrote it down while you're saying it because I'm supposed to be a gang member. Are you a gang member? Like, I mean, I'm unclear on that. Are you actually a gang member or are you just an ex-gang member? Are you gang adjacent? What would your status be in that world?
Oh, my status in that world, I think, is a respectful one. I mean, I myself, I don't dwell on it either way. I do what I do, and through what I do, I get a lot of respect. And people respect me for what I do because my whole kaupapa for the last 51 years is working with this group of people who have come from a horrendous background. You know, same thing. If we're talking about victims, these are the victims. These are the people that come from a background of being abused. You know, and you know, it's amazing how quiet this Royal Commission has stayed silent for so long. I mean, you only have to read Dr. Elizabeth Thing's book on state care. This is the genesis of where our people come from. They're highly traumatized people that have never actually, no one believed them in the first place. You know, Dr. Elizabeth Stanley, you know, her book about people in state care, predominantly Māori, through the policies of urban drift, you know. And when you don't look into the problem and understand it, you're never going to get close to a solution. I've spent a lifetime living with our people, and through that, we get to understand people and we get to try and make changes from within. And I think we do pretty well for the very limited resources we have. In fact, we're lucky to have anything. I mean, and even when we do get resources, look what happens. You know, this continual demonizing of Harry Tam. You know, like, you know, our rehab, we have a 95% graduation rate, which is outstanding.
Is that through the hard to is that through the hard to reach
Yeah.
organisation that you run?
Yeah.
Yep.
We've got people that are 3 years clean now, got their children back from OT. You know, I mean, and our program is only an 8-week program, unlike some of the bigger ones that are better financed than us that run 8 to 12-month programs. You know, so that's what we do, and that's what I do. And what I try to do now as of age is to try and provide some thought leadership within our communities. And so whether I'm a gang member, whether I'm not a gang member, who the bloody hell cares? Is what you do, is how you behave. And that's the whole issue that I've always been on about. You know, let's not worry about what people wear or what their affiliations. Let's worry about how they behave and how we can change that behavior. And just taking their clothes off them, you know, I'm not sure whether that's the most intelligent thing to do. And I'm always so amazed that, you know, our political leaders, who are the leaders of our country, are so dumb. They think that if you take that cloth off that person, they're going to change.
Yeah.
Their behavior's not going to change.
Yeah.
And, you know, and to me, it's just, let's be intelligent about this. Let's not get out the old hates. I hate you and you hate me. And I mean, shit, there's enough of that going around already without us contributing to it. And that's what I don't do. and I think through that I get respect, and it's not what I just say, it's what I do, what I practice,
Yeah.
what I live every day. You're in the trenches with our people. You'd be amazed the phone calls I get every bloody day. It's this and that. Can you help me, Harry? Dog's gone this, what? I get a whole range of stuff, and maybe I've often thought about, I should keep a log of it all. And these are people that I don't even know. Most of the people on my Facebook page, look, mate, I don't know who they are. It's not that they don't matter; they do matter, but I just can't remember that many.
Yeah,
And
right.
people will approach me with all sorts of problems, and they're not all gang members. The majority of the inquiries I get are non-gang members. But that's my life. That's what I do, and at the end of the day, I think when I was on that Jack Tame thing, I said, I just want to be a good New Zealander. I just want to make a contribution to our country, and I just happen to work at one of the hardest ends of this whole spectrum of need, and therefore it's just bullying, that's what it comes down to. This whole thing is like, all those TikTok videos that National had to do during the election campaign, cut through the chase. What is it? It's internet bloody bullying, right? Let's call them out for what it really is. It's bullying, and I've had it all my life.
I think the thing that jumps out for me, Harry, is with all of this rhetoric that's coming out of National, they absolutely don't want to engage with you or take any sort of feedback or anything that could actually help them accomplish something that they want to do, which is I guess less crime. Is they're completely ignoring the lessons of the past that go all the way back to where the mob came from, those broken Borstal kids, and that was all tough on crime of their day. And all of these attempts to be tough on crime throughout the decades have done very little to minimize what the mob's been up to, what Black Power's been up to, what the other various MCs throughout the country have been up to. It's never worked. But then when there's an engagement, I think there'll be a lot of people in your organization that acknowledges that it can be a hard, unpleasant life, and it's not great for families and stuff like that. I've seen mob members that are very devoted parents, but they know the life that they're in. But if we shun these people and we go, you're just not part of society, well, they'll go, we'll just continue doing our society as we've formed it. So if you were able to engage, let's say we put you and Christopher Luxon in a room,
A locked room.
5 minutes, and you say, hey, look, Chris, here's the secret to making progress with the mob. What would you say to him?
Well, I'd just share with them my experiences of working with the mob, and I'll share with them the successes that we've had working with people, to me, you learn if you want to learn. Hey? Your mind's got to be open, yeah? And that's what I said before, the whole dismissive of anything that doesn't suit their narrative comes from a power position. I have power, you don't, right? I'm the Prime Minister, I have power, I don't need to talk to Harry Tam, regardless of how sensible he is or, what he may have to offer. I just don't need to talk to him. And that's what I mean. That it's the neo-colonialist attitude, It's like and it comes down in his world, and he said it all prior to the election, one of his first public statements, the bottom feeders. And that's his persona. That's how he sees the world. There's the top feeders and the bottom feeders. And he's here to serve the top feeders, not the bottom feeders, despite what he says he's here to serve all New Zealanders, but he won't talk to some of us, right? So you can measure the genuineness in this guy's language, right? It is what it is. He's a top feeder.
I also have to point out the fact that he said that you're irrelevant.
Exactly.
But you sure as hell weren't irrelevant when you endorsed the Labour Greens. That seemed to be very worthy of note when you suggested to people that were listening to you that you better get out and vote and you better get voting for Labour and Greens. That certainly provoked a reaction from them.
And look how many Greens got on.
Yeah, good point.
Hey, it's not that our campaign wasn't successful. It was actually very successful. It's just that Labor didn't have any decent policies for people to vote for. Now, I'm not even going to be popular with Labor now, am I?
Thinking about being locked in a room with Christopher Luxon. On that line, like if you were given like carte blanche to introduce some policy that would help in the area that you're working in, the hard to reach people, whoever they are, what kind of policies would you want to see implemented by whatever the name of the government is that would do something to help the group of people you're working with, the communities you're working with, rather than potentially harm them or isolating them?
Well, first and foremost, like I keep on saying, like myself, having been, a policy manager in government, when you develop policy, the first thing you have to do is have really clear problem definition. And we don't, right? And having clear problem definition comes about when you develop a really good understanding of the genesis of the problem that you're dealing with, right? And so and as you guys have already been on my company's website, you will see our framework. If you understand the literature around hard to reach, it always begins with engagement, right? And the reason why it starts with engagement, because basically social services aren't designed for this community. So if you think about the broader population of this country, the justice system, the social services, the health services actually work reasonably well, apart from the lack of resourcing or money or whatever, right? But the system in the main actually serves the bulk of the population. But there's a segment of the population that doesn't do so well, and you can call that group the disadvantaged, which you need to do a bit more. And that's like Māori service provision and all the rest of it. So you deal to the disadvantaged. And then you've got this relatively small group. It doesn't matter what you do, it doesn't work, right? And what that tells you is that the system is not designed for that community. So that's why when you look at the literature about hard to reach communities, it always starts with engagement. Why engagement? Engagement is getting to understand their needs and what works for them. And in our framework, we talk about hard to reach Māori communities design, develop and deliver. So again, if you take a look at the Kahukura program, it wasn't your standard meth rehab program. It was a program that was designed by our own people and delivered by our own people. Yeah. And that's why you get the successes. I mean, after 51 years of working in this field, that's what I've learned. And I believe it is a good framework to work from. And those people that you're showing there, the majority of them, or a significant proportion of them, have now gone into tertiary training to be clinicians. Now, before Kahukura, they probably wouldn't have even considered it. We've got peer support workers who were the fire order at Kahukura. They're now enrolled in EIT to do certificates in addiction and so forth. Now, if it hadn't been for Kahukura, it would have just been another meth addict. Probably in prison, probably involved in organised crime, probably involved in violence. But now he's got a purpose. He wants to be a clinician. He wants to be able to help his bros and help their families. Now, that's the stuff that will come out in the evaluation when we actually get it completed. But that's the sort of things that we do,
So this is the thing that becomes incredibly frustrating. What I hear you saying is you are helping and pulling people out of the area that Luxon and his ilk are saying, these are the people we need to pull out of this area. That's what's frustrating, right? Because they're saying, so we're going to do that by, doing boot camps which as we all know don't work. The research shows doesn't work. They've tried it in New Zealand before, doesn't work. We're going to ban gang patches, like didn't work in Whanganui. In fact, Harry, we spoke to Chester Burrows just before he passed away, and he said very clearly to us that it's a great headline and it's terrible legislation. So this is the former police minister in the national government. You know, over in Western Australia, it's making some kind of impact, but also, you know, crime is moving to other parts of the country, and there's workarounds happening for it. So, what's frustrating to me is we hear this government talking about, you know, they're going to spend money wisely. We're going to look at every single one of your dollars and we're going to handle it wisely. We're an outcomes-based group. Well, they say they're an evidence-based group, but I don't know about that so much. And then there's people like you who are giving those outcomes, who they're going, why would I talk to him? It's incredibly frustrating. As someone who wants the best, I'll say the word outcome. Me and Chewy always talk about what we want from legislation and in society is the best outcome. How do we get that best outcome? And it's like this government in the areas of gangs is going, well, I'm not going to look at the best. I'm going to do the way we like it. Not necessarily the best, just the way we like it. Because if we have to do it the best, then we have to acknowledge that perhaps some of those bottom feeders are the people that we need to rely upon to actually be the ones to do the work to get to the place we're telling society we're going to get to. It's completely frustrating.
I think it's actually worse than that. It's not only they don't want to know about it, they actually want to kill us off. That was the thing that he was saying. You know, when I get in there, I'm going to rip up every gang contract. You know, so it's worse than not wanting to know. It's intentional, and that's what I mean. So when you go through all the rhetoric and all that, see it for what it is. It's about a distraction. They actually want more people in prison, right? They've made that really clear, tough on crime. Now, let's also understand every consecutive national government have always brought in private prisons. So this is where this is leading to, because our prison system as it is today is already over full. Yeah. The prison system cannot recruit enough people to work the prisons, right? So you change these laws so they become more draconian. The prisons are going to be absolutely chocker, right? So what's the answer? Oh, private prisons. Yeah, I'll put money on it. That's where it's going, right? So
Seymour's already said 5,000 new beds. I think that's the number he mentioned before the election.
Yeah. So where's the money coming from for that? Who does it serve? 100%. Because private prisons are not, the money doesn't come. It comes from New Zealand, but it doesn't stay here. It goes to some overseas consortium, you know, some multinational bloody, you know, penal industrial complex somewhere, you know. And so when you start looking at all this, this is about asset stripping of our country in many ways. And if that's not colonization, what the bloody hell is, you know? We really got to see it for what it is. You know, it's like Dylan, you know, he's in the song, he said, you know, I might not be the master, but I ain't no fool, you know. And the thing is that you might think you're some dumb gang member, but I can tell you now, I can fucking see through this bullshit, you know. And the sooner that the other people in this country see through it, the better.
Do you think that's likely? Because it's unquestionable that National romped home this time around. So there's a pretty big hill to climb for people to see through this bullshit. And as much hatred as they put towards the left or the Labour government that's just gone out, that's a lot of bullshit to overcome before they see it for maybe what it really is.
Well, the danger to that is the breakdown of society, right? That's the danger. That's the game that we're playing here, you know. And I think it'll be a terrible place if we ever degenerate to that. But, you know, like we've had this neoliberal consecutive governments for 30 years now. And in that process, it's dumbed New Zealanders down. We're taught not to know our history. You know, like we talk about this housing shortage, you know, that we've been going on and on about. But if we understood where the housing shortage came from, it started when the white settlers came to New Zealand. Yeah. Māori didn't build houses for white folks, yeah. And then when you send 4 shiploads into Petone Harbour, then they're going to live. So we've had a housing shortage from the day of Pākehā settlement, right? And in 1933, I think it was, the first Labour government brought in state housing, because that's the only way you can provide enough housing, because the market will not provide. Market will provide housing for the rich folks, but it won't provide housing for everyone, right? So basically, it was market failure from the very beginning to where it is today. And if we don't understand the history and we keep on saying, do away with state housing, sell off the housing stock, that's why you've got so many people now sleeping on the streets, which I never saw when I was a kid growing up. That wasn't New Zealand the way it was when I grew up. And we've been dumbed down. We've been taught to not know our history. The whole concept of egalitarian society, the land of bread and milk and honey. Well, a lot of people don't have bread and they don't have honey and they don't have milk. We know that, but we don't understand why. Because over 30 years, that's like a couple of generations now that know nothing about having an award rate of pay that, you could live on. People, look, put it this way. When Samuel Parnell was a settler in Wellington and he refused to work more than an 8-hour day, right? Since that time to now, we've had IT, we've had, all this mechanization. We're now into, AI, right? So if anything, our working days should be shorter and shorter. But people now are working 16-hour days and still can't live. Their kids have to miss out school to go to work to support the family. So what does that tell you? It tells you the people that owns the IT and all that are not sharing that wealth. It's going to a few, and the rest of us are left to live on the crumbs. That's what's actually happening. But because, you see, my grandkids will not know about award rates of pay. They will not know about trade unions and having to fight for your conditions. When you take a look at industrial accidents and deaths, they have been going up and up for 30 years.
Yeah.
But again, we forget that in my day, you had a safety inspector on the job who was a union person, and he could shut down that job if it was unsafe. You don't have that now. You don't even have safety inspectors inspect the sites. So, the sooner we start talking about our history and reminding everyone what we've lost, the better. But, oh, no, that's something that so-and-so Muldoon did or whatever. That's how they kill it off. They kill the discussion. They kill the conversation. And people like me that reminds people what we lost are a threat.
Mm-hmm.
We like to refer to Muldoon here as the New Zealand's last socialist prime minister. And it makes me feel yuck every time I say it. But the more I think about it, the more it's true. I think you're exactly right. On so many things, it all comes down to history. And when we chop our history up into little three-year terms, and then it's like, well, it's the last government's fault that did this. We can't do this because the last government did this. And we don't look at these long-term systemic problems. Labor are a bit better at it than National, but they are all, you're quite right to identify that the wheels came off when neoliberalism came in. You mentioned, people not being homeless. I remember the first time I saw a homeless person, it was 1998.
Wow.
And I had to go to a bigger city than I lived in to see that. Now in Dunedin, I see probably 3 or 4 homeless people every day. And it's just like, what's going on? There's people that don't have a place to live, or they can't afford them, or it's market rents, or, social housing isn't an option. It's bleak. And I think you're exactly right to sort of point out that, hey, look, if we're going to lock them all up at the same time from the same people that had a little experiment with Serco in prisons last time round, and they're talking about privatization of a whole bunch of things at the moment, softly, we don't want to scare people, but we're definitely talking about it. I don't think it's crazy to go, these are warning signs. And if we look at the history, we see the arrow that it's all pointing towards. And I think it's time to make noise, and it's time to listen to alternative voices, and it's trying to listen to people in different walks of life that are going, hey, look, here is my experience. It's not irrelevant because it comes from a place of truth. And so I'm glad that you're sticking your head up against the trench line and just taking flack and saying what you have to say, because it's still valid. I don't care if you had a patch on your back.
Exactly.
That's what you know.
Mm.
It's important.
Yeah, and to me, what's wrong about caring for other people? Hey, what's wrong with that? Hey, there's something terribly wrong when we talk to people like they're bottom feeders. Hey,
Mm.
isn't there something wrong with
And
that fucking tone and that language? Jeez, if I had my way, he'd get a fucking slap.
Careful, Harry. The headline tomorrow morning will be Harry Tam threatens violence.
What's a
Be careful with that one.
Well, I'll slap anyone that talks that kind of language.
I mean, there's a lot of people out there that just do not understand gangs, and because it's not in their orbit.
Well, they don't see them.
I keep on.
They don't live with them.
I keep on reminding people that this is a society that those people created, because the society that most of us have doesn't work for them, doesn't look out for them, comes down on them like a ton of bricks. It's that replacement family for a lot of people that had just a shitty, broken upbringing. And when you treat those people like the enemy, what options?
Hey, I didn't make this up. Like I say, go and read Elizabeth Stanley's book. George. Nice white middle class academic. She went and did the research. It wasn't something that Harry Tam just invented. But that's the reality of it. And of course, I guess it's acrimonious to some extent, because it highlights how our governments enable that to happen, and we were all part of that democratic process. And that legacy hasn't changed, as with OT. The latest ombudsman's report, it continues to go on. So we're now getting into the fourth generation of that dysfunction that's passed on and on and on, and with more prisons, more people, it will continue. So if the people of this country really believe what National's offering with all these extra laws that's going to solve the problems, I kid you not, it's going to make it damn sight worse, And I think people pointed out, prisons are the prime recruitment ground for gangs. So what, it just sort of beggars belief, really, doesn't it?
Harry, I think I know why Luxon has your name on his lips fairly often. It's because you're a threat. I mean, the way you're speaking, like I'd never met you before we started texting on the phone the other day, right? And I'm like, who is this guy? What's he all about? I want to know more. You come across as a smart, articulate, connected, clued in dude who's well researched and well read. No, not big scary mongrel mob man, but actually someone who knows their shit, knows what they're talking about, and maybe has some answers for some of these questions. So you're a threat. So he has to demonize you. The right has to demonize you, because you could be a path forward that actually helps some of the problems that they're talking about but have no real solutions for.
Yeah, well, I don't intend to threaten anyone, really. I mean, I just speak my truth, and like I say, I have fantasies of wanting to give certain people a slap, but I never do it.
We started this conversation.
Thanks for the head swell. It's great already.
No, it's great. If you read the chat, mate. If you want the head swell, go back and read the chat afterwards. We started this conversation and got you on as well to talk about the legislation. So my last question for you is actually back to that. I want to know from your experience and from being in the world, if the government does pass this legislation banning gang insignia, what will the gangs do? What will the outcome be from that, do you think? I
don't really know, because like I say myself, I don't sort of place a whole lot of things on patches and all the rest of it. It's I guess it's like the frock for a reverend, isn't it? They wear a frock. That's what distinguishes their identity. And so when you start looking back again at the genesis of this, right? So when our people, whether it's the process of colonization that stripped Māori off their economic base, and then urban drift was the answer, bring them to the city to work in the industries. And then you had this process called the process of assimilation. So that's how Pākehā New Zealand was going to deal with Māori after you colonise, and we're going to turn the brown folk into just like white folk, and it backfired terribly. So in other words, the sense of identity was stripped away from these people. And when they become institutionalised, their identity was further stripped away. And I remember one time when I was organising a hui with the youth gangs in South Auckland, going back around about 2015, and Roy Dunn was the national president of the Notorious chapter, who I actually got to fund him to go and work with those youth gangs. And with this hui, we had Wali Homaha, the police come in and so forth. And I said to Roy, I said, do you think it would be a good idea for us not to wear the patches and to get the kids not to wear their colours? And Roy looked at me, stared me in the eye, and he said, fuck, I will. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, that rag that you're talking about, that's all that kid's got. That's all he's got. And you're telling me to take it off him? Get fucked. See, that's what we don't know. You know, when you've lost your identity and stripped away from you, you form your own identity. Yeah. That's what you have in terms of subcultures. Yeah. And so that subculture becomes the predominant culture in that person's life. So when you're talking about taking away patches and that, why did these gangs form? Why did they have colours and patches? Because their search for identity that was stripped away from them. And now we're going to strip them off them again, just like when they legislated to stop Māori speaking Māori. It's the same thing. It's colonisation all over again, all right, for the same group of people intergenerationally. And that's what
Harry,
it comes down to.
Harry, it's been an absolute pleasure having you tonight. Anytime you want to come and have a chat, mate, our door's open. Anytime. We'd love to talk to you anytime. And next time you're in Dunedin, you've got my number now. Give us a call. We'd love to catch up.
Yeah, well do.